What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show. Day 2 of NFL free agency here, live on the Team 980, streaming live on the free Odyssey app and in video form on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see a dancing, happy Anthony Haney, even though you can't hear the song on YouTube land that he's dancing to.
One of my favorite songs.
You want to tell the people what it was?
It was J-Rock. Win.
Curve everything else.
Win.
Yes, very important media edit there.
Yes.
To make sure that we get the the proper not fines from the FCC.
Yeah. I like the way you think, man.
Yeah, I living my life trying not to get fired, Anthony. That's basically how this show operates. What can we get away with without getting fired? Day 2 of free agency, and Anthony, we're already off to I don't want to say a better start than yesterday. We're off to a very different start than yesterday because it was about 24 hours and 5 minutes ago that the Commanders traded for Laremy Tunsil, and our entire worlds got turned upside down. Everything we were planning on doing, scrap that. No, sir, not yesterday. We're gonna do a bunch of Laremy Tunsil stuff today. The only breaking news that's coming through with any urgency as of right now is that Tiger Woods ruptured his Achilles, went under the knife, had surgery on Tuesday. So that's not relevant for NFL free agency, and I don't really know how relevant that is in the golf world anymore either. Outside of they just had that indoor league that looked kind of fun. There's a bunch of funny clips that went around, like good for golf. We're not a big golf show over here, but Tiger Woods ruptured his Achilles. That's the breaking news today. Yesterday it was the Commanders traded for Laremy Tunsil, Anthony. Slightly different days.
Yeah, 2 totally different days, to be honest. But we made a couple of moves today.
For sure. And we'll get into him a little bit. Will Harris, safety from the Saints, signs. He previously was with Detroit. That's where he crossed with Lance Newmark, so another guy that they have some familiarity with. They also bring back Jeremy McNichols on a 1-year deal. But Anthony, here's kind of what I've been chewing on, thinking about over the last, whatever hours since I woke up today. Is there another team that has had a better another of the contenders that has definitively gotten better at the level the Commanders have? And again, I want to set this up / caveat it by saying, I do not think that the Commanders are done, and they better not be done because they still have holes. This is not to say this is a perfect team. This is not to say anything other than what I'm about to say as I say it, right? Has there been another team that since the end of last season has more that's a true contender that has more dramatically changed their roster for the good than Washington? Because I would be hard pressed to think of one that has. I mean, the Debo acquisition is definitely interesting, but I think it makes them better. They obviously re-signed some really important key pieces. And then nobody's acquired anybody better than Laremy Tunsil, probably. I mean, who else is even in that class? Like, would you say the Steelers and DK, if you put DK up there? I think that depends on what you think of DK and what you think Tunsil has left. I mean, the Raiders are not a contender, so them acquiring Geno doesn't even count. Nobody got Myles Garrett. Someone will probably get Trey Hendrickson. That will be a potential needle mover. But to this point, at 4:07 p.m. on Tuesday, March 11th, is there another contender that has had I want to say a better offseason, but an offseason that has, for 2025, made their football team more betterer than the Commanders?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say if I was to give a second team, because I think probably the Commanders have had the best, the Lions, they've getting
done well.
healthy.
They've done well, but
acquiring DJ Reed.
DJ Reed's a great acquisition, but they lose Carlton Davis. It's kind of a wash.
Yeah. I just look at them getting healthy kind of thing. Like all the pieces that they've, had to work around last year, I don't think they'll have those problems going into the season. So that's the only other team for real. The Eagles have lost a lot and continue to lose a lot.
Right.
The 49ers.
The Eagles today trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who thanks for helping the Commanders win that game in December last year when you got ejected and did a bunch of other dumb stuff. So they're done with his shenanigans. They ship him off to Houston. They get Kenyon Green, who's been mostly a bust, but he's a former first-round talent that, of course, will be awesome for the Eagles and probably replace Mekhi Becton at right guard. And somehow he'll be good because the Eagles O-line coach / the Eagles offensive line infrastructure is better than anyone else in the league. So, okay, let's say Kenyon Green turns into Mekhi Becton. They're neutral there. They're worse at safety probably.
Yeah.
Because although Gardner Johnson was annoying, he wasn't bad. They lose Milton Williams, so they got to replace him inside, and he was really, really good. Now he's secondary to Jalen Carter, of course. Not worth them paying that amount of money, but they still got to replace him. So, like, the Eagles have maintained their status as favorites. That's for sure. I'm not saying that the Eagles have had a bad offseason, but they haven't gotten better.
Yeah.
Commanders have gotten better. The Vikings, we'll see, depending on what they do at quarterback. I like some of the other moves they made. I think John is a good addition for them. Pricier than I would have wanted, but like if I look at the player, like fine. He gives them another piece inside with some pass rush. And they signed Fries, the kid out of Indianapolis at guard, to a big deal. So they've helped the interior of the line, their O-line. They've re-signed Aaron Jones, which should make J.J. McCarthy's entrance into the NFL easier. So, like, I don't dislike at all what Minnesota's done. I just don't know if they're in the same category anymore because McCarthy's got to be good right now. Now, I like J.J. McCarthy and think he can be effective pretty quickly, but he's not going to be as effective probably immediately as Darnold would have been. He's just way more cost-effective and could be as good as Darnold by next year.
Yeah. And to be honest, I might even have to take the Lions out because I forgot they lost Aaron Glenn. They lost Ben Johnson. Like,
sure,
you got to factor that into it as well.
I still think they're in contenders, but like,
for
the
sure.
overall part of their offseason,
yeah,
100%. So you got them. I mean, the NFC West. I mean, Devontae could be a huge, like, the Rams maintaining Stafford, and then Devontae is just a perfect fit for what they need. Like, think about what OBJ did for them a couple years ago. Like, a precise route runner who gives you something in the red zone. They've got the vertical speed in Atwell. And then Puka being Puka, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Puka is going to change his number, 12, to give Devontae 17. So Puka is still there. Kyron's back. Their O-line is back. They, in fact, pick up an extra draft pick, trading out Jonah Jackson, who was, out on their offensive line. So, like, I think the Rams would probably be close to that list, depending especially on how good Devontae is. And, like, I think because Devontae has bounced around so much, like, people underrate how good he still is. He was awesome at the end of last year. And he was really good in Vegas when he was healthy. Just the quarterback situation was a nightmare, and he has been difficult to deal with, it certainly seems, or he's certainly had a tumultuous couple of years here. But he's still an awesome football player, and you get him in the stability of the McVay incubator out there, and I think he's probably the closest guy to Tunsil that's moved.
Yeah.
And the Rams just had to pay him. They didn't have to give up draft capital, which is nice for them. But still, like, Tunsil, if he's one of the best 5 or 10 even left tackles in football, and then Coleman could be a significant upgrade at guard, and Debo, like, that's pretty mega in terms of a single offseason to move the needle that much if these guys pan out, which understandably we won't know for months is a huge if.
Yeah, for sure. Really, I have 2 questions. Maybe we can do it in the next segment, but it's off the Laremy Tunsil acquisition. One, I want to ask about the false starts. Apparently, he had 12 last year.
Yeah, he had a lot.
And then also the best lineup. And you and Logan sort of kind of got into it yesterday, talking about where, Coleman will probably be best fit, maybe a right tackle or left guard, or if he wants to bump over to the right guard. Like, I don't know necessarily where you necessarily stand.
Yeah. Tell you what, if we can, I'm going to say this on the air so that you can start trying to work on this now. What are the chances you could pull Logan's answer that we can play for folks if they missed it in the 6 o'clock hour yesterday? So we'll let you hear what Logan had to say about that. I'll give my take on what's next for this Commanders offensive line. I'll answer Anthony's other question as well. And then let's also take a quick look at what the Commanders still probably have on their to-do list over the next couple of days. And then we can get into the phone calls as well, because it is a Vibe Check Tuesday at 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. We're going to spend most of this hour taking your calls on what you think of what the Commanders have done this offseason. Then at 5 o'clock, my guy Paul Gallant. I got people in H-Town. Because my guy Paul Gallant, known him since we were in college together. He's been working down in Houston for years and years and years now, and he's going to join us with more on Tunsil and what the hell the Texans are doing. They traded away another offensive lineman today. Very, very interesting offseason for Houston. So we'll talk to Gallant coming up at 5. Your calls, and I'll answer Anthony's questions next here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Your calls coming up at 301-230-0980 on a Vibe Check Tuesday. But Anthony just asked a couple of good questions, so I wanted to get into those real quick, answer those, because I know there are ones that a lot of other folks are thinking about beyond just Anthony. So the first one is on the false starts that Laremy Tunsil had last year. And here's what I would say. One, I have not studied Tunsil yet, and I haven't watched them to know if there's like something weird was going on consistently where they're trying to go on two and Tunsil forgot, or is he just not, is he having bad games and he's a little jumpy? Like, I don't know what happened. But here's what I would say about false starts on the regular for an offensive lineman, certainly of his caliber, someone who's going to be confident in their play. It's one thing if it's like a guy who's not very good and the guy's trying to get a head start, or he's jumpy and or you're facing Miles. You know, I had 7 false starts all year, and 4 of them were in one game against Myles Garrett. Like, okay, we got it. Their whole offensive system was discombobulated and terrible last year. It's why Bobby Slowick got fired. It's why their offensive line coach got fired. And I would tend to say that while he has been a guy who's picked up false starts and penalties, specifically false starts on the regular, that is something that was magnified by and enhanced by, or whatever the opposite of enhanced is, by the fact that their offense was a mess last year. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. When you're not confident in anything, these are the kinds of things that happen. And hopefully also it's not as big of a problem in a Washington system that tends to go pretty quickly consistently because they get on the ball and they go. They get on the ball and they go. There's not like a whole bunch of waiting around, trying to do hard counts, trying to get the defense to undress itself, with all this whatever. It's like get to the line of scrimmage, use good formation or use formations that give you the information that other teams get with motion or hard counts or whatever, and let Jayden go cook and do his thing. So hopefully that's a situation that's mitigated for Laremy Tunsil. Anthony, your other question was about the offensive line situation, right? In terms of how things go from here.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we, before we get Anthony, assuming that you have Logan's answer on it, before I give my 2 cents, let's hear what Logan said. Logan joined us yesterday in the 6 o'clock hour in our first ever Take Command live, basically where we just did the podcast on the radio, uninterrupted, commercial free, the whole deal. And so when Logan and I talked about, the Tunsil deal yesterday, we obviously talked about what this means for Brandon Coleman and the rest of the line. And here is what Logan had to say.
This was the thing that I kept coming back to as the big offseason narrative issue is how do you get better on the offensive line? You need to upgrade, in my opinion, the left tackle spot. That's not an indictment of Brandon Coleman. I just think he was playing out of position a little bit, right? Now it gives you some flexibility. You got your cornerstone left tackle there. You got a great center. When Cosby's healthy, you got a right guard. 3 of the 5 pieces are exactly where you need them to be, and then you can kind of mix and match as needed with the other pieces you got. So to me, this is an essential move. This has to happen. I'm so glad it did happen because it raises the floor of the offense. Look no further than the Super Bowl. I know we tend to have like this immediate knee-jerk reaction to seeing people like in the Super Bowl specifically, oh my gosh, the offensive line's terrible, whatever. But that's with a young quarterback, with a guy that's going to change this organization's trajectory. You need to protect him. You need to keep him upright because when he's upright, he's a dangerous football player.
So that's where we sit on more Logan things, where Brandon Coleman kicks over to guard, Wiley still plays right tackle, and Tunsil plays left tackle. And Anthony, I think that's the right play. I just think that moving Brandon Coleman to right tackle, like, I don't know if he has a chance to be great at tackle. I think he has a chance to be great at guard, which is kind of the calculation that the last regime made with Cosmi. Could Sam Cosmi have had a perfectly fine career as a pretty good right tackle in the NFL? Yeah, for sure. And frankly, like Brandon Sheriff, maybe he would have even been better. Maybe Brandon Sheriff could have been a Pro Bowl level right tackle. But he was an all-pro guard. Like, if he had been able to maintain the level that he played at here when he got to Jacksonville, like that's a guy that would be like burgeoning on Hall of Fame level. You didn't sustain it for long enough. He was great as a guard. And I think that Coleman's athleticism, his size, his bulk, some of the ways that he struggles are kind of in space. So you take him out of space, and now what can he do? like one of the things he really struggled with, and I remember talking to Logan about this a ton last year because this will stun people. I am not an offensive line expert. I know, look at me. How could you not think that I am not an offensive line expert? But Logan is. Like, Logan played wide tight end in the NFL, where he's basically a sixth offensive lineman in a lot of cases, and he coaches offensive linemen, in terms of skills training and all that kind of stuff. He knows pass protection. He knows that stuff really, really well. And as a tight end, his personal playing experience in the league was much more similar to a tackle. So he fundamentally understands the concept that I'm about to talk about. But he would say, you have a responsibility as a tackle when an edge is coming at you to try to find his midline. So you're trying to be right in the center, and you have to kick step or slide or whatever the technique you're using on that particular snap in a way that puts you in the right position. And sometimes Coleman would overset, sometimes he'd underset. He just really didn't have the consistency of doing that kind of thing in space. At guard, you don't have to deal with that as much. Because guard, you're right on top of each other, set, hut, bang, you bang into each other, and you just block and fight for your life. And Brandon Coleman is a big, strong mamma jamma who can do that. Not to mention, as a puller, he's a super athlete and can get out in space, and I think ups your ceiling compared to a guy like Allegretti, who will fight and maul the best he can, but he's not the athlete that Brandon Coleman is. So if all of a sudden you have Coleman and Cosme at your guards, and you're a team that runs a lot of GG power, like pull, pin pull, regular power, trap, where you have a puller coming across, all of their stuff that require, these gap scheme runs that require movement by your guards, and you have Coleman at one and a healthy Sam Cosme eventually at the other. Holy crap, man. That's a good setup for this team for a long time. Not to mention, hopefully, the stoutness of the middle of that line that can keep Jayden clean. And then you get, Tunsil on one side. And now, if Wiley's not amazing, but if you only need help at one tackle, you can constantly chip. Now maybe instead of even needing chips on both sides, like they did a lot last year, you get chips on one. And you're not going to find a better player, I think, for the price. You could save $10 million by cutting Andrew Wiley, but then you have to replace a right tackle, and I don't know that you're going to find a better right tackle for $10 million than Andrew Wiley. And at that point, you might as well just keep him and keep the continuity of year two in this system where he's on Jayden's front side. Jayden kind of knows how he plays. And Wiley's a pretty darn good run blocker. He might be, struggling one-on-one pass protection sometimes, but he's a really good athlete. He gets out in space. And he plays nasty. He's got an attitude. So there's a lot of stuff that I like about Andrew Wiley, from a value stake that say I'm perfectly fine with him being my fifth best lineman in 2025.
Yeah, and I think the part you added about, just having only to chip one side, I definitely think is going to make life a little bit easier just because you don't have to worry about the left side anymore. Laremy Tunsil's over there, and he's on the blind side. At least, Wiley being on the right side, like Jayden can, work with him,
If you got a chip, there's only so fast that pressure can come. And if Jayden can see it, and if a guy beats a chip, well, it's not going to be instant pressure.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Jayden can then beat that with his feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's mega. And how there's even a way to lose that's good and helpful. And Wiley seemed to understand that. I don't have any concrete examples. I'm sure I could go find them on tape. There's not a specific play that comes to mind, but what side did Jayden escape to last year?
He always went right.
He always went right. So even if you're going to lose inside, but you can wash your guy down inside and give Jayden then a clean edge to get out, that's not a bad thing to happen for the Washington Commanders offense.
Yeah.
And Wiley was able to at least do that last year. By the way, speaking of tackles, Cornelius Lucas assigns in, it was Cleveland, right, Anthony, I believe?
Yep.
That's where he wound up.
2 for 10.
Which I know Linnell must be heartbroken because he wanted him to start here or something. Cornelius Lucas, good player, good teammate, good all the things, but good as a backup, swing tackle. He's not as, and the thing is, I think some people thought that he was a young player, and it's oh man, maybe he'll eventually get his spot. Oh, he played well when he did this or that. Cornelius Lucas is 33 years old. And I, as a 35-year-old human being, hate that is old, but there's no upside potential in Cornelius Lucas. paying him a lot of money to be your swing tackle when there's no upside, when you could go draft a guy in the 3rd or 4th round potentially that can be your backup in a pinch this year and also has upside. It can maybe eventually replace Tunsil or replace Wiley next year. I mean, Tunsil, you're hoping is going to be around for like 5 years because tackles can play into their mid-30s. But maybe he's replacing Wiley next year. I think that's a smart way to think about your roster spots and the space you have available. So I have no problem with them letting Cornelius Lucas walk. Not to say that he's not good, but when you think about the finite level of resources, cap space, roster spots, you got to make some choices, and that's one I don't mind. 301-230-0980. We have a couple of folks on hold, including some really good questions that I already see on the call screener. So we will get to those next, but there are also phone lines open. It's a Vibe Check Tuesday, and we're checking in with you on what you think of the Commanders through a day and a half of free agency next. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. We're taking your calls, 301-230-0980. It's a Vibe Check Tuesday. So how do you feel about what Adam Peters and company have done so far? Let's get things started with Mark and Laurel. Mark, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hi, Craig. How are you?
Doing well, Mark.
Okay, great. You know, it's not over yet, but I thought we'd be busier. I love the Tunsil trade. We gave up a lot to get him, but I mean, he's a Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Fame if his career keeps going. I mean, to me, I love it. He solidified the line, and when Cosby comes back, we'll be a dominant offensive line, and we got to protect Jayden. That was the whole point. Left tackles don't come around. So he, to me, that was the most important pickup. You know, your quarterback and your left tackle, you got to protect him. Kinlaw, it's a reach, especially for the money. Most draft pundits, most experts, so-called talking heads, are down on it. You know, as far as the risk reward, I think it's an Adams Peters decision because of his knowledge of him in Frisco. So I think he thinks he can get the best out of him. I hope so, because right now, I'm kind of I got to go with Peters' decision, but if I had to do it, I would have never picked him up. But, you know, Peters knows him.
And that's the thing, right, Mark? I'll let you keep going in a second, but that's the thing that I'm agreeing with you. I also struggle with this because I think it seems like there's a tie to someone on every one of these guys, and I'm like, man, like that means you have more information, but are you being biased towards familiarity? It's the thing that I talk about with fans. Like, just because you've heard of the guy doesn't mean that he's actually better than the guy that you haven't heard of. And that, I wonder. That said, I think one thing the staff has done really well, and Dan Quinn does really well, is finding the right roles for guys, which is part of the reason why so many players had career years here, like role players that were maybe better role players. It wasn't like they turned into stars, but they had better production than they had previously. And I'm certainly hoping that Kinlaw is one of those guys. And I kind of think that he's going to play in some 3-down packages with, the other 2 defensive tackles where he can play more of an edge. I think that, last year they used that package with Payne and Allen on the edge at times. I think he is probably better suited for some of that than he is a traditional defensive tackle, like he's been used a lot in his career. So I am intrigued by the Kinlaw signing. If they use him the way that the other teams, like San Francisco and New York did, and expect it to just be better, like that feels silly to me. But I don't think that's I would be surprised if that's the plan. Now, whether that's worth $15 million, I don't know. I have a hard time judging these markets because there's just so much cap increase that adjusting our brains to what a $15 million player is hard. But I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, I guess, is where I land on that. And it sounds like that's kind of where you are too. It's a big wait and see.
He's earned the benefit of the doubt. This is going to be Adam Peters' first scrutinized pick because it's a decent amount of money and he had a whole lot of cap space, and this is who he chose. So I think people are going to look at this. Chin, I hated to lose Chin. Thought he did a good job. I think there's a hole there. I heard what you said yesterday about we don't know, Butler and the other kids and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Right now it's a hole. I still think we're going to pick up somebody. And we may even use our draft choice because I like the boy out of Georgia going late. So if he's available, I definitely want him.
Yeah.
So that's all I got to say. How you feel about it?
Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. You got Malachi Starks, the kid you're talking about at Georgia. Imanowari from South Carolina is interesting in kind of that 29 range if he wagons up there. Then again, after the combine he might not make it out of the lottery, if you will. But they also signed Will Harris today. And I'll tell you, Mark, I watched a little Will Harris tape. I'm not going to tell you he's a world beater, but I'm not going to tell you I don't like him. So the Chin thing is interesting to me, but I definitely think they're already starting to make moves there. Thanks for the call. And I also don't think that they're potentially done there. Like, I know Simmons said that he would like to be in Washington. The former Denver safety was in Atlanta last year. They do a really good job of packaging their stuff on the back end. And so if they can get a package where Will Harris is doing what he needs to do, if you get a package where Percy Butler's in a good position for him, where Tyler Owens, Jeremy Reeves is still around. Like, they have a bunch of bodies. The question, can any of them really kind of elevate to a higher level next to Quan Martin? But Will Harris is a super versatile player. Like, that dude lined up in the post. He lined up underneath a lot in the box. Like, he plays a lot like Jeremy Chin in that way. I think he's a better coverage player than Chin. He'll be physical and hit. He'll go up and support the run. He was sometimes playing outside corner based off alignment where, teams are doing some funky stuff, and he's able to match it on the outside. I saw a snap against Dallas where he's matching up against CeeDee Lamb and, runs with him. Not that I'd want to do that on the regular, but, he did it. So I like the Will Harris signing today on the safety front. That doesn't mean that there aren't holes or that they shouldn't, if their best player available at 29 or wherever else is a safety, that they shouldn't go in that direction. But that's definitely, Will Harris is a good floor to have at the safety position opposite of Quan Martin. Let's go to Aveen in D.C. Aveen, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. Very enjoyable offseason so far. It's probably unhealthy how much I've been checking, Reddit, Blue Sky, Twitter, refreshing. I feel like a lot of our signings last year came in the 5 and 6 o'clock hours, so who knows?
Hey, I'll take it for this
but
show, that's for sure.
Yeah. But this Harris signing, like you were saying, it feels a lot like the Chin signing, where it was somebody under the radar, not somebody I really heard of, not somebody you really saw on people's like big boards, but you see him and like you're doing all this research right when he gets signed and you're looking at his highlights and you're like, oh yeah, this seems like a Dan Quinn type of player. So that feels like a good signing. But for the positions of need, I feel like, it's edge and corner. And, I'm hoping from this offseason we can get like 2 starting level players from those positions. And like you said, you don't want to go into the draft, feeling like you need to pick somebody to fill in a hole. So, I'm kind of hoping we can feel okay with what we do to address edge and corner. And, just looking at the edge positions, like I'm looking at like the athletic big board and then you look at the PFF grading and it doesn't match up. Like people's gradings of players are all over the place. Like I look at like for edge, like Charles Amenahu and Dennis Gardick, like they're low on the athletic board, but then you look at their PFF grading, it's pretty good. So I'm like, okay, maybe we can get some people like that who are more, bargain value signings who still have some good football left to play. So I want to know what you think about like those type of players, like edge signings and corners who might be more under the radar. And then really fast, just that receiver. I would be totally fine if we brought back, Noah Brown and all that. It seems like we're fine there, but it also kind of seems like, we're the type of team that like a veteran wide receiver would really want to play for, end his career playing with Jayden Daniels. Like maybe we can get good value signing there. Maybe like a vet like Keenan Allen or something for like a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
Just want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I'm going to let you do the old hang up and listen, but I think those are great questions, and you make a couple great points in there, so thanks, Aveen, for the call. One, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder on all of this stuff, and whether it's media types of The Athletic and PFF, or I've got the 33rd team's free agency tracker up because they have a very, very extensive list. I've been using NFL.com, Greg Rosenthal. He's got a great top 101 list that he's updating constantly, and like, I know his 101st player is Nick Chubb, for instance. Like, that might be 30 on someone's list. Someone else might be like, I believe in Nick Chubb. I think he's a great person. He works really hard. He's going to get back to form. And if he can stay healthy, finally, like, he'll get back to being a 1,000-yard back. And someone might have him as the 30th best player. Like, that's how this stuff goes. And I think also not just like when you're making a generic big board, that's one thing, but each team has a different set of criteria on and off the field. How much will they tolerate of off the field nonsense? How much silliness will they tolerate from a player in their locker room versus what kind of scheme fit is he? What traits does he bring? How hard does he play? Some teams are like, man, his good is good. I don't really care about the bad. Some teams are like, nope, floor's way too low. We can't tolerate that in our locker room, or that's not how we play. And that's how DQ is. Like, you're out there, you're busting your ass, or DQ's going to bench you. And so the lists are different for everyone. But I think Aveen has identified the 3 positions where I am most intrigued for them moving forward. I think corner is the hardest one based off what I'm looking at right now. Like, because the names that I think were potential needle movers are pretty much off the board. Byron Murphy goes back to the Vikings, Carlton Davis to the Patriots, Travarius Ward to the Colts, Paulson Adebo to the Giants, DJ Reed to the Lions, Brandon Stevens even going to the Jets. So that leaves you with some guys who have either kind of fallen off in their careers or are just flat out old by NFL standards. And again, I cannot stress how much it pains me to call 34-year-olds and 33-year-olds old as someone who is now 35 years old as a human being and still feels young, but I don't have to play NFL football 17 times a year. So the biggest name left is Darius Slay. And I would absolutely be interested in bringing Darius Slay here, getting him with a chip on his shoulder, seeing if you can get one good year out of him, and then hopefully draft a corner that can replace him in the long term. Stephon Gilmore, that never happened last year when he was a free agent forever. I think that's probably a no-go. Asante Samuel Jr. is interesting, guy that obviously with the name because of his dad and was a high draft pick, whatever, people were in on him initially, but hasn't really had a very good career. Rasul Douglas has been around forever. I think he's probably more of a nickel. Bradbury's been, I don't say he's been washed for a couple years. I mean, Kendall Fuller's a free agent again. I know that'll excite some people, mostly Hokie fans, but I'm not really interested in that. Mike Hilton, he hits. He can play some nickel for you. Kind of a safety corner nickel hybrid guy, but I don't know that that's what they want. And same thing, like Jonathan Jones, like he was really good for a while and then hasn't been good. And so Jeff Okuda, former top 5 pick, could they coach him up? Probably not. So the corner market's the one that I'm a little scared about, but I also feel like that's the one I'm most comfortable about having a pretty good player available in the draft. I don't think there's a clump of corners that are somewhere between the 25th and 40th best player. There's like 4 or 5 guys in that range on most draft boards. I think you can get one in the draft. I also don't want to go into the draft knowing I need a starter at any position. Nevertheless, that one. Edge, there's a couple more options. Edge, I mean, you still have Azeez Ojulari out there, who's only 25 years old and has been pretty good for the Giants. Again, not earth-shattering, but he's been pretty good. And then you also have some veterans. You have DeMarcus Lawrence, who obviously is tremendously familiar to DQ. You have Amenahu, who's, Logan said it really well, he's a bit of a silly goose. But he also had some serious off-the-field stuff. He was arrested on a misdemeanor domestic violence charge a couple years ago and has had an ACL injury. So it's kind of a no-go for me for multiple reasons. You've got Fowler, if he'll stop tweeting. Zadarius Smith is still out there. The Rams released Leonard Floyd today. Matthew Judon is still out there, who got pretty good draft return last season when he was traded from the Patriots to the Falcons. So, there's a bunch of dudes out there that are professional edge players that can be in the rotation for Washington. And there's guys with a little more pass rush juice. There's guys with a little bit more solid edge play, like in terms of setting the edge against the run. There's younger guys like Ojulari, who's 25. There's older guys like Lawrence, who I believe is 33. There's guys that are kind of in that 27, 28-year-old range that Adam Peters seems to really like signing free agents in. So there is a lot of options at those positions, none of whom are going to be your number one. But I don't know, and this is, I think, the lesson of the Tunsil trade, is it's hard to find number one guys in free agency. If you want those, you're going to have to draft them or trade for them. And then, Leonard Floyd's gone. He just signed with the Falcons. That's per Adam Schefter. Right on cue. And then the last one, real quickly, wide receiver. You got Amari Cooper, who I think is interesting. I don't think Keenan Allen does it for me. Lockett is interesting. Elijah Moore's only 25 years old. He's interesting. Robert Woods is out there. Mike Williams. So there's some vets. Juju, Nick Westbrook-Akine's got a little speed. I think the hard part about the receiver market is there just aren't a ton of dudes with a ton of vertical speed pop. MVS is out there, and I know MVS isn't going to get anyone excited, but he's the kind of guy that's got a little bit of vertical speed. I think this is why they're bringing in Michael Gallup, the former Cowboy who retired and is now unretiring, for a visit. He's still only 29 years old. But he, at his peak, was a really, really big-time speed receiver. They need vertical speed in this offense to complement Terry's vertical speed. They have the underneath part in Debo. I think there's a couple other guys that could have that. I look at a guy like Rondale Moore, who was with Cliff in Arizona. He's interesting to me as a weapon type, but has more vertical speed down the field potentially. So there's still some receivers out there that the offense, Tim Patrick was good last year in Detroit. There are guys out there that the offense could make them into useful players. But I do think your top targets next year are already on the roster, and those are going to be Terry, Zach, and Debo Samuel. And then we'll see if Ben Sinnott develops, and we'll see who else they ultimately sign. And then hopefully Luke McCaffrey takes a step as well. All right, we got time for a couple more calls. We got at least one on hold. So Chris in Damascus, you're first up next. And then we'll see who else wants to chime in here before we get to Paul Gallant with more on Laremy Tunsil at 5 o'clock here on The Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too, at the Team 980. Paul Gallant going to join us coming up in about 8 minutes, 5 o'clock for Not My Beat today. A couple more calls real quick. Let's get to it at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Chris in Damascus. Chris, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thank you for the Hoffman Show. The way I see it, the way Logan laid it out kind of initially, we got Tunsil at left tackle. That means Coleman's got to go to left guard. He said Biotis, Cosme, and then Wiley on the end. And this is not lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone. It's so important. The backup center, Allegretti's got experience. He played in the Super Bowl. He was backup for the Chiefs in his Super Bowl experience, guard in the Super Bowls. He knows what he's doing. He's a backup center. If you remember when Biotis was down for a couple games, he was calling out helping Dieter out at center. That was a disaster. So we got 6 linemen. I feel good. We need a swing tackle. We're going to miss Lucas, although I guess but you want that set, and that's what I'm focused on. I'm kind of happy, but we'll go from there if that makes sense. And I love Keyshawn George. How many block shots is that young little playing?
How did we get to Keyshawn George? No, that's not how we do the show. We don't just randomly. We're driving. Oh, look, a cliff.
Oh my gosh.
What the hell?
The sound you just made, though, sounded sort of kind of like a bird. I'm not going to lie, Greg.
Anthony, talk for a second. I need some
like a cage bird. I don't know how we got there, to be honest. Going from talking about Allegretti and the rest of the O-line to talking about
stop to breathe.
George.
He didn't stop to breathe.
No, he did.
And then we got this. We got to figure out how to swing tackle. And Keyshawn George, how many block shots that guy have? I'm like, whoa, how do we go from blockers to block shots?
Questions we need answers for, Craig. Do you have them?
How we got from blockers to block shots? No. Who could play swing tackle? Sure. I can look at the tackles available. Also, I think I said Matthew Judon available earlier, and then someone in the chat was like, no, he's not. There are too many moves happening. When the free agent trackers can't keep track.
You also mentioned Slay earlier. It's not official. I did see Jordan Schultz reported yesterday. I don't know, but it seems like Slay is probably going to be headed to Pittsburgh pending a release or him being cut.
I mean, he's already been released.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's too much going on. Like, I'm still looking at Schultz report. Darius Slay signing with the Steelers. Like,
oh, maybe that happened. Here's a name. I gotta figure out if there's something going on with this dude. But I'm kind of curious. Like Jedrick Wills was a pretty high draft pick. Did he have something bad happen off the field, or did he just kind of not play very well for the Browns?
That's a great question.
Let's see. They picked up 5th-year option. Someone MCL injury, was placed on the IR in 2023. He's only 25 years old, so like he's a free agent. Go sniff around that. So there's like guys like that are all over the league, and guys have reclamation. Like there's all kinds of reclamation projects that can happen. Not to mention, like if you want to use one of your draft picks on a guy who can be your backup swing tackle, and he's a backup making rookie money, like that's how you do it. And then that guy is ready to take over for Andrew Wiley in year 2. So the idea that they got rid of a 33-year-old with no upside. And again, that doesn't mean that his current level isn't worth something and good for Cornelius Lucas. He's going to go be a $10 million backup or a potential challenger for a starting spot in Cleveland. But like, I'm not losing sleep over Cornelius Lucas. So that's that. Well, that's the worst segment we'll ever do. Paul Gallant's good at radio. He's going to join us from Houston next. Oh, the throwback to 2010, 2011. This puts me in a certain place, Anthony.
Uh-oh.
That place is the studios of Z89 in Syracuse, New York, where I co-hosted a show called Call It a Rap with a guy named Paul Gallant, who we will now bring on for this.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Paul now hosts 97.5 ESPN in Houston. Gallant, what up, dude?
Just a brief moment. And I almost got triggered, and then I realized I'm an adult. I can't get mad about Owl City anymore. So
No.
Here we are.
We somehow are adults now. It's terrible. I've been talking about this during free agency. It's like, oh, you can't sign that guy. He's too old. He's 34. And I'm like, no. But alas, yesterday, the Commanders, Paul, traded for 31-year-old Laremy Tunsil from the Houston Texans. What did you like? That happened for us, like as we went on the air, basically yesterday. As you've now had 24 hours, 25 hours to think about it. What do you make of the trade from the Houston side of it?
Happened right as I went off the air. So very frustrating, but got a little more perspective to talk about it on today's show. This is tricky because last year, the Texans' offensive line was maybe the worst in the league. And Laremy Tunsil, who most people will tell you is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, one of the best tackles in the league, was a penalty machine. He got penalized for false starts, for illegal formations, illegal man downfield, and he drove a lot of people nuts. And when you're the highest paid part of the worst unit on the team, that is the reason that they ended up losing to the Chiefs because they allowed 8 sacks in that game. There's a lot of people here who are happy he's gone. I thought about it from today's perspective, though, from the Texans' perspective. If you're trying to press the reset button on the offensive line, you better have at least some talent to start with. And right now, I look at them, they're missing a whole lot. Tunsil, from what I understand, and I saved the offensive line film work for the people who actually know a thing or two about offensive line play. From what I know, he was pretty solid last year, especially in pass protection. But there are some things that make you wonder about him, not the person, but more what kind of a leader is he? And I guess I hate to call out how much somebody loves the sport, but this is not exactly the meanest tackle, you know? This isn't somebody who, say, someone hits Jayden Daniels by the sideline. This is not a guy who's going to get up and try to tear someone's head off. And there were a couple times last year where we were hoping Tunsil will do that for Stroud. But look, this is definitely a good move for the Commanders. This is still a good player, and I wonder how he fits into a team that's in just 1 year with Jayden Daniels at the helm gone further than the Houston Texans have ever gone in their existence, which is to a championship game.
So I think it's interesting to talk about a Washington-Houston swap because so many people here look at what happened there, and they're like, how do we avoid Texans year 2? Because CJ was such a revelation as a rookie. You guys make the playoff run. Obviously, Washington's playoff run did, as you just mentioned, go a little bit further. But there's kind of this like, oh, my God, we don't want to be Texans 2.0. Then they literally trade for one of the Houston Texans. And now, a year later, I think when we look at it from the Houston side, are they just flat out like hitting the reset button on all of this? Like, whoa, maybe we did too much trying to go all in right away, and they're trying to now slow build this, or is this a rebuild on the fly? Like, what's the strategy for Nick Caserio in this front office?
It's a great question. I mean, I think when you see that they traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson today and you look at what they have on the defensive side of the ball, I think they still believe that they're a contender. But this past season for the offensive line play, Craig, my God, it was a disaster to the point where C.J. Stroud looked worse than he did the year before, looked uncomfortable, seeing ghosts, happy feet, all the bad things you don't want to see out of a quarterback. It happened with that offensive line. The hope is that offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, who no one wanted to leave after year 1, is such a bad offensive coordinator that his leaving is going to make things better for the offensive line. They have Chris Strausser, who was their offensive line coach, retire. Get this, did you know that Greg Popovich's son is now the Texans offensive line coordinator?
I had heard of that.
Cole Popovich. So the hope is that Cole Popovich, who apparently disagreed with Bobby Slowick as offensive coordinator, is going to explain things better for this offensive line that truly could not do a thing last year, Craig. I mean, pass protection was one thing. The season that Joe Mixon just had was a really good one, and it was one of those ones where you saw him, you turn the football, you turn around, you hand the football off to him, and you're just hoping that he could make something happen because that offensive line sure as hell wasn't happening.
Like, I would like to know, did he have a higher percentage of yards after contact than any other back, not just in the league last year, but like where does he rank of the last 10 NFL seasons for running backs? Because he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, right? Mm-hmm. He had no business being a 1,000-yard rusher. That the plan that they had, the way and the lack of solutions they had, the lack of changes they tried to make was like borderline unprofessional.
It was every single week the same thing. And I had a conniption when Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator, when asked about some of the struggles the team was going through, gave this just zinger of a line: football? It's football. And I then thought about jumping out the window, went back to continue doing my job because I do enjoy it. This is to talk about Joe Mixon there. I don't know how he got the yards that he did because sometimes it was running through people, but very often he was just juking out people who had run through the Texans offensive linemen. Was that always Tunsil's fault? No. Again, Tunsil was the best offensive lineman on this team last season. I suppose, though, that's not saying much given how bad things were last year.
Well, and that's the thing is like the structure. I think Washington fans understand that structure and offensive line play and play calling is really massive because many of the same guys who were here last year that were here 2 years ago played way better last year compared to 2 years ago when Eric Bieniemy was calling 1,000 pass plays in a row with Sam Howell as his quarterback, and that quarterbacks can make the difference as well. I know that CJ kind of regressed last year, but the way Jayden got rid of the ball and how quickly he did made a huge difference. So there's that. Paul Gallant, 97.5 ESPN in Houston with us. I want to double click on the leadership thing because I've now heard that a couple places. Like, basically, my sense of it in talking to you and talking to another guest yesterday and some other folks is that Laremy Tunsil, you don't have to worry about. He will take care of his business. He's not necessarily going to help anybody else with their business. Is that correct? And two, like, has he been challenged on those fronts? And do you think that a change of scenery, he could take on a bigger leadership role? Or is that just not who he is?
That locker room likes him. So I think it's important to remember that. But, and also, I mean, it's the job of the coaches to help out young players. So I don't know that Tunsil, you could say, isn't helping out younger players. But I do think that Laremy Tunsil is all about Laremy Tunsil. This is a guy who gets frustrated that he hasn't been a first-team all-pro left tackle. This is a guy who's very clearly proud of all the things he's been able to do, whether it's playing at that level on the left side of the line or, negotiating his own contract twice, successfully becoming like the highest-paid tackle in the league. So I think Tunsil is very much about that Laremy Tunsil brand. That's not to say, we're Allen Iverson or someone like that. But I think that for Tunsil, this goes back to something that the Texans were doing 2018, 2019 during the Bill O'Brien era, and I think it drove Bill O'Brien crazy. There were a couple of players that you felt like weren't on the same level as everyone on the team, and I'm sure for O'Brien, coming from the Patriots, he hated that, and I'm sure Nick Caserio, observing it, didn't necessarily like it. But there were two guys at first I remembered not seeing at every single practice. It was DeAndre Hopkins and Jadeveon Clowney. Laremy Tunsil became one of those guys, and I personally don't like the idea of certain players having, I guess, excuses to not do all the work that the rest of the 52 on the active roster are doing, And I think you could make the argument that Tunsil, the offseason commitment, in terms of just being there, it wasn't there. He will do his job, that is for sure, but he's going to show up for work when it's time to show up for work. It might be a little bit of a sluggish start for him. And this is not me calling out his professionalism. I think if I were in the same shoes as him, I might be operating the same way. He knows he's one of the top tackles in the NFL. But I think as far as installing a culture here with the Texans, I think that they needed to move away from it because there were moments last year, Craig, where this offensive line was struggling. They would be asked questions about the struggles, and they seemed incredulous with the actual questioning of their play. And, this is before the 8-sack games that they were allowing of C.J. Stroud.
So I guess the follow-up, I don't even know if you can answer this other than just like a best guess, but like the culture in Washington is very strong. You have guys like Bobby Wagner, who everyone looks at and is like, that's Bobby Wagner. We're going to do whatever Bobby says. Jayden's a good leader. Zach Ertz is kind of the example. And they brought, obviously, Ertz and Wagner back. And one, they were both good players. Bobby was second-team All-Pro last year. But because they are the standard bearers, if he gets inserted into that kind of culture, has there ever been a year where he was in Houston where he had someone to look up to like that there were other people that were tasked and good at that? And then how did he respond to that?
Yeah, the way you framed it is I think, very important there. I think you're talking about pelts on the wall. And yeah, I mean, with this current group of the Texans, I mean, it's a lot of young guys. The leaders of this team are C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. And there's some other young players who were stepping in. Daniil Hunter's come in, and he's been a big part of it. But Tunsil was one of those guys where if you're one of these young players and you know how good he's been for a long period of time, are you comfortable calling out a guy like that? Like, I think that is something that's very important. And, when it comes to this offensive line who clearly struggled this past season, it just felt like the sense of urgency to be better wasn't necessarily there until it was too little too late. But as someone who covered Bobby Wagner when he was up in Seattle, I know all about the leadership that guy provides. I do think that's a good spot that you're talking about that he is joining. I think that perhaps for Houston, the timing is just a little bit different because there aren't as many of those elder statesmen, if you will, in the locker room anymore. Since he was one of them and, things didn't work so well with him last year, I can see why they said, you know what, let's just get a bunch of draft picks because negotiating another contract with him, we're probably going to lose again with how good he's been the last couple of times.
Yeah, apparently the Commanders love to negotiate with guys who are their own agents too. Bobby's his own agent, so this is right up their wheelhouse, baby. We got it all covered in D.C. Paul, where can people go if they want more on what the Texans are doing / trying to do from you?
Well, you can catch me on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, at Gallant Says. I'm on a variety of different streaming platforms like YouTube and all that jazz. And you can catch my radio show from noon to 3 on ESPN Houston down here in Houston, Texas. Craig, always a pleasure to catch up with you, man. Hope all's good. And let's do this again sometime.
Sounds good. And by the way, it's noon to 3 Central, 1 to 4 for those listening.
The East Coast.
Eastern time. I got your back, buddy. I got your back. You've been you haven't been on the East Coast in a long time. You haven't been on the East Coast so long that like your Boston accent's even faded a little bit.
No, I even developed a little bit with Texas twang from time to time so I can fit in with around the rodeo committee and all that such because I'm going into the rodeo tonight. Apparently there's some country singer playing and I need to go see this person. I have no idea who they are. You could have, just like before, Craig, as musically challenged as I was 20 years ago, it is just as bad now.
We're not that old. We're not 20 years out of college yet. It's sadly only 15. That hurt. That really hurt. Bye, Paul.
See you, Craig.
Thanks, buddy. Paul Gallant, everybody. We'll react more to what Paul had to say about Laremy Tunsil next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Got more player signing news.
Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news.
ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting that Justin Reed is headed to the Saints. So the two-time Super Bowl champion headed out. Actually, does he have 3 rings? I can't remember if he was on the first team that they won. But at least two-time Super Bowl champion is headed to New Orleans, where he will replace Will Harris, who, of course, signed with the Commanders earlier today, or has agreed to terms. He'll sign likely tomorrow. So definitely a big move. I was curious if Reed would be in play here. Probably a little bit too expensive. But ultimately, the numbers come in at a 3-year, $31.5 million deal, 22 guaranteed. So that is the latest from ESPN's Adam Schefter, and I think Rappaport had it too. So multiple reports. Justin Reed to the Saints. Anthony, I thought Paul was super interesting on Laremy Tunsil, and Landry Locker talked about this yesterday as well, that it's not that Laremy Tunsil's a bad guy. It's not that Laremy Tunsil's a bad teammate. It's not that Laremy Tunsil is someone that you necessarily have to worry about. And like to state the obvious, like Laremy Tunsil is probably still, despite how good he is, best known for being the gas mask guy on draft night. So like the idea, like people are talking about his character and whatever, and it's like, well, isn't he the guy that, like, yes, all of that is true, but he has been very consistent on the field as a player for a long time. I'm very curious to see what happens here when he is no longer in a position where he would even remotely be a leader, where he is someone who can just come in and like do the job, or that there is an expectation of leadership and maybe some help from coaches in a way that he hasn't really had before. But even amongst his group, like, Biotish is the leader of that group. Allegretti's got Super Bowl rings. Wiley's got at least 1 Super Bowl ring. Like, these are guys that don't need to be led. Like, hopefully he'll be helpful to Brandon Coleman playing next to him, but, like, helpful in the way that a teammate who you have to communicate with constantly is helpful. They don't need Laremy Tunsil to be a leader here. They need Laremy Tunsil to play awesome left tackle. And it seems like that's exactly the ideal spot for Laremy Tunsil.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to hear both of them sort of kind of allude to that. But I will say, like, I sort of kind of do want my left tackle, or, you know, I guess my question to you would be, who's that person on our offensive line that is going to be that feisty guy? If
Biotish.
Okay.
Like, Biotish is like, if someone hits Jayden on the sideline, Biotish and Wiley are racing to take that guy's head off.
Okay.
And by the way, you want to know who else has some of that in him? Coleman.
Okay.
Coleman's got a nasty streak. And I think, like, if Allegretti has a nasty streak, like, he doesn't mess around. Once Sam is back.
Yeah, when Sam is back.
Sam is the one winning that race.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're going to be in that room and the other 5 guys at the top of the depth chart, with Allegretti probably moving into a backup role, assuming that Coleman's going to play left guard, are Nick Allegretti, Tyler Biotish, Sam Cosmi, Andrew Wiley, and Brandon Coleman.
And we just need you to come out there and do your job then.
Just fit into the room, bro. You'll turn nasty fast.
Yeah.
Who's the sweetest person you know, Anthony? We got someone's grandma that we can throw in that room. She'll turn nasty. With those, like, she'll fight someone. Like, they have an approach. Like, because the thing is, like, this team isn't dirty by any stretch. It's not that kind of nastiness.
But it's
like,
a brotherhood. It's like,
yes, he's gonna, like, but it's a brotherhood that also can celebrate individuality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember Mark Schlereth telling this story, or some version of this story over the course of years, where, like, back in the Hogs days, some of those guys would get together. They had, like, the 5 o'clock club, and they'd go drink a beer sitting on a bucket behind the facility. And I think it was Mark, or maybe it was one of the teammates, one of the other guys, like, as they got older, especially, like, they didn't participate in the 5 o'clock club anymore because they wanted to go home and see their kids because they were older and they had a family now. And, like, the other guys didn't hold it against him because he was going to be his own guy. They always had a seat for him if he wanted to come. And if Laremy Tunsil wants to do fashion stuff or whatever, like, he might bond with Jayden over some of that stuff. I don't know if you've been paying attention to some of Jayden's brand deals this offseason. He ain't doing all the different chips and this and that. Like, this dude's attacking some different lanes to take advantage of his fame for monetary value. He and his mom, if you watch the Amazon Prime doc, like, they're very specific about the brand that they are crafting for Jayden Daniels. So, for all we know, we might see Jayden and Laremy Tunsil sitting, runway side at Paris Fashion Week or something. I guess Paris Fashion Week, I think, just happened. Pick another fashion week. I don't know why I know that. But pick another fashion week. Milan, if that hasn't happened yet. And if they bond over that, great. Like, there's plenty of, in a locker room with 53 guys, 68 or whatever it is now with the practice squad. Like, there are room for different personalities and different individuals to be individualistic. As long as you come together and do your job and you don't do it in a way that takes away from the job that others are doing. Be an active participant in meeting. Help your teammates where they need it. Like, yes, on the field, there's a play style with an aggressiveness that this team requires, and I think they probably think they can tap into that. Or he's so good as a pass protector, if he doesn't quite meet that bar, it's worth the trade-off. And I don't really believe in making a lot of trade-offs when you're talking about that kind of stuff, but you can't, like, there's certain things that are worth it when maybe the trade-off is a little bit on the play style, but it's not in a problematic way. Now, if they start telling him, like, we need you to do this, and he just ignores them, well, that becomes a different story. But I think they know what they're doing. I think that they understand that there just aren't in theory, if you're looking for a top 5 left tackle, there's only 5 of them. And they had a chance to get a guy who they probably think is one. And if that's the case, then you kind of got to do it, because I don't think they have another way to go about getting one, considering where they're in the draft, where they are on the draft, and where they probably will be drafting for the foreseeable future, assuming that they are as good as they were last year for the foreseeable future, because Jayden is as good as he was last year for the foreseeable future, if not better.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Coleman, I think he ultimately wins here, just because to the left of him, he has a 5-time Pro Bowler, and then to the right of him, he also has a guy in Biadasz who's Pro Bowl caliber as well. So I think his growth, his development is definitely going to be something to monitor, and I think he probably can grow into, what Sam Cosmi is, and also what Brandon Scherf was when he was here. So
I mean, that's a high bar. I would be surprised if he gets to the Pro Bowl, like borderline all pro. I mean, there's some people that had Cosmi like top 5 guard in the league level. I don't know that I was that high on him, but like, that dude's really good. But if Coleman can get 85, 90% of that, like, hell yeah. Like, we like to use the Madden ratings on this show. Like, if Sam Cosmi's a 92 and Coleman can begin 86, nevertheless an 88, like, I'll take that for my second best guard all day, and he's cheap for the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. Or they'll extend him early and get him on hopefully a pretty decent deal if they want to extend him after year 3. So I just think it's interesting, and like, a year ago, I'd be more concerned about that. And I think I've been kind of wondering if they would take on some more risk off the field. And to me, this is and what that might even look like. To me, this is the right kind of risk. A guy that may not be the prototype for your culture, but is not going to pull negatively at it, is more of a neutral, even if he's not the positive that you want out of most of your players. And that hopefully will adapt to the surroundings that he's in, and maybe even you get the best out of him. Maybe you even get a little bit nastier of a run blocker. Maybe you get a little bit more nasty out of him. I mean, Bobby Johnson's a pretty intense guy as an offensive line coach, so I'm very curious to see what Laremy Tunsil looks like in this culture, in this locker room, in this brotherhood, because I'm pretty sure he can still pass block. That part I'm not that curious about, because I feel pretty confident that it's going to go well. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, maybe take a few calls and otherwise go around the NFL. What in the world are the Seahawks doing? That is one of the questions we will try to answer. And then coming up at 5:45, what are the other NFC East teams doing / what have they done in free agency? We'll get you all caught up before Dave Johnson joins us on Wizards Game Day at 6. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. We'll go around the NFC East in 12 minutes, 5:45, here on the Hoffman Show. Look at what's trending before that. But, Anthony, I feel like the biggest movers / the biggest shakers in NFL free agency have probably been the Seattle Seahawks. Like, that's the team that is has most notably made the biggest splashes, made people go, what the what? Now, part of that might be because one of the podcasts in my rotation is Mina Kimes' podcast, and she is a Seahawks fan and dedicated an episode yesterday to going over what the hell the Seahawks were doing. But, I mean, they traded a Pro Bowler in DK Metcalf, and one of the most underrated quarterbacks in football, probably, in Geno Smith. Geno has been very, very good for multiple years, and I was a noted Geno Smith hater for a long time.
And he ain't right you back.
He didn't. But Geno, I think there's some people that like Geno too much, and I think there's some people that like Geno not enough. But his circumstances in Seattle have been terrible. From an offensive line and a structure standpoint. Like, the last year, the offensive coordinator thing was super weird. They fired him after the 1 year. They brought in the guy. You remember, it was, I'm trying to remember his name. Was it Ryan Grubb?
Couldn't tell you.
He was the OC at University of Washington, at UW. And then they brought him over. And it wasn't very good. John Schneider, like, their general manager, who's very, very good on basically everything but this, he has been quoted multiple times, Anthony, basically saying, like, I don't pay guards. And thus, they've needed guards for a decade.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I wonder why the Seahawks can never have a strong offensive line. Maybe because the general manager doesn't believe in it. And it's like, hey, buddy, maybe when your approach isn't working, you should try something else.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been bad up front forever. And Geno has just, chalked them down, to a top half offense every single year. And, Lockett's been really good for a long time. DK's been DK, which is a good but not great player. And then JSN had a really good year last year. So they had the receivers. They've always seemingly had good backs, but their offensive line situation is a mess. And so what they do is they trade away Geno. They get a third-round pick. The overall value of that pick is, in the trade, is slightly better than what the Commanders got for trading Sam Howell to Seattle. Let AP cook. But there were some pick swaps and stuff there that make it not quite the same. I've seen some people be like, oh, they both were trading for third rounders. And I'm like, you should understand how contracts and pick swaps work. But they're not far off. And then they sign, and like, to me, if you trade Geno and you trade DK, and you kind of want to tear it down offensively, let your defense come together for another year. They're really good. They're really young. Another year in McDonald's system. He had those guys cooking by the end of last year. I kind of get it. I don't know what your quarterback plan is, but maybe, I don't think you can go with Howell. Howell was not good in the very limited sample size he had last year. Obviously, the end here in DC was very bad. But you could find something other than giving Sam Darnold $100 million to get worse quarterback play than you would have gotten from Geno for some semblance of the price. Like, not enough of a price discount because Darnold's a lot younger. It's one of those things where if you're going to hit the reset button, do it. And it feels like they made this very, like, we got a good comment in the YouTube chat from Lama Bryant. Seahawks are competing with the San Francisco 49ers to perfect a blueprint for tearing down a team that can make the playoffs but can't win a Super Bowl. NFL is becoming like the NBA. You're either competing for a ring or blowing up the team and trying to get franchise players in the draft. And this is, like the Sixers model back when they had Andre Iguodala. They were the first team to, like, really do this, where they were like, Andre Iguodala's good. He can only get us so far. Let's trade him. And that was the start of the process. And everyone was like, what are they doing? And it's like, they don't have a way to get a top 5 player. So they went all in, and they wound up getting Embiid. And, it hasn't worked out. And with Joel's injury, might not ever. But, like, they've been a legitimate championship contender for multiple years because they got really, really good and then just kind of stunk in the playoffs or had the Kawhi shot bounce in. That was probably their year. And it does feel like there's a little bit of that in the NFL in some places, except for then you go sign Sam Darnold and you're right back on the mediocrity treadmill. And that's the thing I don't understand about what the Seahawks are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have been more content with them staying with Geno.
Because like with Geno, you're right there in the NFC West.
Yeah. Also, I just don't think Sam Darnold elevates the talent around. Like, he was spoiled last year. Like, the weapons he had. So I would expect him to look as good as he did. But Geno looked good, and he didn't have a lot, work with up front anyway. The run game was like a little inconsistent because his guys were banged up, Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. So a lot of the stuff was put on Geno's shoulders. Like, he passed for over close to 5,000 yards.
Yeah.
So
like Sam Darnold last year had Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, a couple other weapons.
T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah,
Aaron
Hawkinson.
Jones,
and Aaron Jones is running back, one of the 5 best play callers in the sport, a pretty solid offensive line, and a defense that like gave them a ton of chances because they were turning the football over like crazy and super aggressive and playing well for most of the year. And he still, according to PFF, had more turnover-worthy plays. Now, that doesn't mean turnovers, but turnover-worthy plays where he's exposing the football to danger than any other quarterback in the league. So is that a perfect metric? No. Is that the only metric? No. But if you're, turnover-worthy plays, some of those probably were Justin Jefferson catches. And if that's not Justin Jefferson anymore, what does he look like? And I think that's the thing I just don't get is, like, if you're going to hop off, if you're going to say Geno Smith is not good enough to get us where we want to go, or he's older or whatever, and maybe they're on a younger timeline, is Sam Darnold, maybe they're hoping that he has a Baker type thing, where like, hey, he's now in the prime of his career, he's 28 years old, like we're going to get his best, and they should, based off age. They should get Sam Darnold's best years in Seattle. But what are Sam Darnold's best years with what they've got? Meanwhile, I get what they're doing more than I get what the Steelers are doing. I mean, I guess I get what the Steelers are doing. The Steelers are just going, screw it. Like, straight up, like, we've needed a receiver. They have been on think of all the receivers that Washington has tried to acquire and been in the trade mix for over the past couple of years, right? Ayuk, Debo, on down the list. The Steelers have been on every single one of them too. And they finally got one. And in order to do it, they got DK Metcalf, who's a good but not great player. I know, controversial take. Thank God we're done having that fight. A good but not great player gave up a second rounder and paid him $30 million a year? I know it's not a full, like, guaranteed 5 years, but, like, it's a 5-year, $150 million deal. Couldn't be me. I get, they got their receiver. They want to throw a bunch of go balls. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers winds up there. I think that George Pickens is probably done there, but we'll see. They're going to throw a million go balls, and DK Metcalf, like, he's real fast. He's not a jump ball guy, but he'll go get it from a speed standpoint. Sure, fine. Congrats. You got a good NFL playmaker. I would not have done that for DK Metcalf.
I think it's a bad mix if their guys Aaron Rodgers, just because Aaron Rodgers loves timing guys, or he likes throwing the back shoulder fades, and he likes his receivers to go out there and make contested catches. George Pickens, I think, he'll probably have some success, but the guy you just paid $30 million for, that's who a lot of your plays should be designed for. So I don't know if that is going to be a perfect marriage or not, but we'll see.
DK is a combustible fella. Aaron is famously not patient.
Not at all.
So we'll see. You know what I would pay to see? I want them to run it back with Russ.
Ooh.
Because Russell and his patience and his demeanor, attitude, personality with DK. I mean, they probably played together in Seattle though.
Probably. Yeah, they probably did.
So I guess they've got a history, but
maybe like a year or two.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been more than that before Russ got shipped off to Denver.
Yeah.
Denver, but hard to remember. That was only 2 years ago. DK has been there for a while. DK was the same draft class as Terry. So I guess they probably had like 3-4 years together, actually.
Dang.
I know.
Yo, time
really be timing.
Yeah, it does.
It really be flying. What about the rest of the NFC East? A couple of teams have made some. Actually, you're not ready for this radio tease, Anthony?
Uh-oh.
You're not going to believe which team in the NFC East, not named the Commanders, I think has had the best offseason. Next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 6, Dave Johnson talking Wizards, of course, ahead of their game tonight. Anthony, I got a mea culpa real quick before we get into the other NFC East moves real quick. Last night, as we were signing off, I said the wrong game. I said in 15 minutes, Wizards Heat, because I know for some reason that Wizards Heat games typically start at 7:30, pregame 7:15, but it was not. They were playing the Raptors last night. They were in Toronto.
All good, brother, man.
Dang.
The thing is, I wanted to pod you back up, but we also had a hard out.
Yeah, no, there's no correcting that.
Yeah.
There's at the end of the show, like the show ends, my mic cuts off, and I can't cut it back on. Like it's over. So I had to live with that until right now when I admitted it to you, God, and everybody. But tonight, the Wizards are facing the Pistons. That game starts at 7. Pre-game 6:45. Dave with us at 6 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
6 o'clock. And then 6:15, we're going to go through the top remaining free agents on the market and whether some of those might be Washington targets. So that'll be fun. And also a segment that will probably be dated by the time it ends because something stupid will happen. Something will break, and that's how that goes. Okay. Anthony, what if I told you the team whose free agency I might like the best is the Giants in the NFC East?
That wouldn't really surprise me just because they sucked last year, correct? They didn't have a lot of talent. And it's sort of kind of like what the Commanders had to do last offseason where we're constantly bringing in talent. Granted, this year we're still bringing in more talent. We're getting better and better. But the Giants really didn't have a lot to work with last year.
So the Giants have done some things that don't make any sense. They have been trying to get rid of Darius Slayton for 4 years. And then they re-signed him to a 3-year, $36 million deal, which really is annoying because I wanted Darius Slayton here badly.
Yeah.
They re-signed their punter. Great. They re-signed Tommy DeVito because, of course, they did. And they re-signed Chris Manhertz, who's their blocking tight end. But then they bring in Paulson Adebo from the Saints, who is young and available and pretty solid. They get Javon Holland, 3 years, $45 million. The safety market is really bizarre. The fact that Javon Holland and Javon Kinlaw make the same thing is both correct because defensive tackles are expensive and safeties are cheap, and insane because Javon Holland is 25 years old and really, really, really good, and Javon Kinlaw has been kind of disappointing. It's a 27 going on 28-year-old. Chauncey Golston, good, solid defensive lineman from Dallas. They got him for 3 years. They got an offensive tackle for 2 years, $12 million, James Hudson, and a couple guys down the list. But, the Adebo, Holland, Golston signings, those are good signings. Those are good football players. And they've got some guys defensively. They need Deonte Banks to turn the corner at corner, but now they can put Paulson Adebo across from him. That's good. Javon Holland will help everybody. I just think the thing that's, silly and frustrating about the Giants is they wouldn't give 3 years, $36 million to Saquon last year, and then they give it to Darius Slayton, different position, but they give him that exact money this year when they've been trying to get rid of that dude forever. But, I don't think it's a bad idea to have Darius Slayton complimenting Malik Neighbors. And then they wouldn't pay Xavier McKinney last year, but they paid Javon Holland this year. And I guess I would say it's better to be right once, wrong once than wrong twice. And in that way, I kind of get what they're doing here, even if I don't think they'll be that good because they're still, they got to figure out quarterback, et cetera, and they're probably going to trade up in the draft and blah, 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 blah.
You said it's better to be wrong twice?
No, it's better to be wrong once, once than wrong twice.
Oh, okay.
You'd be we got to double down on our mistakes. Good job, idiot. People do that all the time. That's what Skip Bayless has been doing with his opinion on LeBron James for 25 years.
And he's still living off of it.
Yeah, must be nice. You see KD cook him the other day?
Yes. KD is a funny guy, though.
He's real funny.
He's a funny guy.
Dallas hasn't spent over $6 million a year on a free agent since 2014. And that, by the way, the guy they did it on was Greg Hardy, who was fresh off a domestic violence case. That was still ongoing.
Yeah.
Right after Ray Rice happened. So, excellent work out of Jerry. They resigned, the guys they kept were good. Osa Digizua, 4 years, 80. Cavante Turpin, 3 for 18. Their safety, Marquise Bell, 3 for 12. So they kept guys that were really good and like guys that I was interested in here, but bringing in Solomon Thomas at this point, like he's fine. Javonte Williams, like, okay, congrats, you finally have a running back.
For $3 million though.
But like they do not. I mean, it's better than what they did last year.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams is like a real NFL running back. They didn't have one of those last year. I guess Rico Dowdle, but I think Javonte probably better. I don't know. They're probably more comparable than I'd like to think. But like they haven't done anything because they never do anything. They're always like, oh, we're gonna go big, and then they don't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think them still trying to, clear space just because they got too many guys tied up. But the fact that they haven't signed anybody over $6 million since 2014, that's 11 years.
It's insane.
Have they been in cap hell for 11 straight years, Craig?
No, they've just been dumb the whole time. It's like, oh, the Cowboys, everyone's going to want to play here. Nope.
No.
And the thing is, they've had good quarterback play the whole time.
Yep.
Like, what a waste. You have the thing that's the hardest in the sport. You had Romo playing at a high level till his back went, and then Dak comes in and, like, immediately with no drop-off is good. And outside of the years where Dak is hurt, you've had good quarterback play, and you literally don't do anything but re-sign your own guys 2 years too late, making them so expensive that you can't sign anyone else.
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys, everybody. The Eagles haven't really done anything, which most teams is bad, but they've lost guys, but they're like, they made the trade, Kenny Pickett. They get a draft pick back from Cleveland with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So they got a new backup quarterback. And then Kenyon Green, we'll see if he turns into something good for them. A former first-round pick who was terrible in Houston, but also we've talked throughout the last couple of days about how bad Houston's O-line situation is in terms of the coaching and the scheme and everything. So does he go to Jeff Stoutland and the Eagles and become awesome? Probably. They retain Zach Bond, which is huge. They extend Saquon Barkley, which is fine. But the Eagles, other than that, have lost Milton Williams, lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who they traded to Houston, lost a couple other guys. I don't think they'll re-sign Mekhi Becton at this point because they made the Kenyon Green trade.
Josh Sweat, right?
Josh Sweat going to Arizona is enormous. So they have guys in reserve. They have young guys that are ready for bigger roles, but they are very much, hoping for that internal improvement. But with how they've done in the draft, like, I can't say the Eagles have had a bad offseason.
Nah.
They've got some things that they knew were going to happen that they were planning for, and now we see if they continue to do what they've done the last couple of years, which is replenish talent when it gets old and leaves, or expensive and leaves.
Man, if their young guys really turn a corner, the Keely Ringos of the world, the Sidney Browns of the world, the Eagles they're young for one, and then two, they're just
like we
got our handful.
I want to say easily because the Lions were really good last year, but like the Eagles were the best team in football last year from week 5 on.
Yeah,
the Commanders were the only team that beat them, and it did happen in a game where Jalen Hurts got hurt. So
I'll take it.
I'll take it too. When scoreboard, they keep score for a reason. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, they don't got to get better. They just got to stay as good as they were, and they're probably still the best team in football. And, like, I had a question in the chat earlier. What can the Commanders do to catch the Eagles? They can get incrementally closer, but, like, they need multiple free agencies, multiple drafts, and multiple trades probably to get – like, they're not going to be better than the Eagles on paper going into the season. They're just not.
Yeah.
But can they beat them on any given Sunday thanks to number 5? Or could something silly happen and, it's the NFL, injuries happen, things like that? Yeah, absolutely. You just want to be the best version of yourself, and I think the Commanders have done a good job with that. So there's your NFC East roundup. When we get back, Dave Johnson joins us talking Zardos as they are on a Sega Bob, Anthony, second night of a back-to-back. We'll talk to Dave coming up here in just a moment. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up next, about 15 minutes or so from now, we will take a look at the best remaining NFL free agents on the market. But on a Wizards game day, it's time to talk to Dave.
Right corner, Kismet open for three. It's there.
Time to get the radio party started.
Feeds now the right block of Alsar. Slam.
It's time for Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day.
Block by Koulibaly. Left wing George. 3 on the clock for three. It's there.
Feel like busting loose, busting loose.
Crossover, step back three. Oh, Jordan Poole. You are cool.
Feel like busting loose now.
On the Hoffman Show.
Dave is with us as the Wizards get ready to ball out in Detroit. They got the Pistons actually back-to-back. And tonight, Dave, is the old Sega Bob. That was the first game against the Pistons. Second game of a back-to-back. You ready for your Sega Bob tonight, Dave?
We're ready. We're ready. And you know, as you can hear, we've got, it's not Motown behind me, but they got some music blaring, so that means I'm pumped and ready. But believe me, there's nothing like going through customs at 2 in the morning in Detroit, which is will add to the challenge of the second of back-to-back tonight after playing in Toronto. But, hey, the journey continues tonight. You know, life is good. You've got NBA basketball. And you know what? The Pistons, think about it. The last 2 seasons, a total of 31 wins. 2 seasons. They're on 36 wins right now, and they're just a game out of the 4th place. They've got the 6th place position, the final guaranteed spot in the Eastern Conference. So, you know, again, did they go through some black eyes and some bumps and bruises? And, you know, they draft Cade Cunningham and they change coaches. And but now it's starting to feel like, you know, it's paying off for them. And what I'm saying is that's where we are with the Wizards right now. You want to be in a position where you become like the Pistons, you become like the Magic, and even go beyond that. But it just, there's no shortcuts, as Will Dawkins always talks about, in the NBA. And that means you might have to endure a couple of win-challenged seasons, shall we say. And certainly that is the case. However, for the Wizards, this young bunch, you know, I hope people are excited about our young players because they're balling, as the kids like to say.
They certainly are, and they're playing better as of late. But let's double click on the Pistons for a second, and I think there's another good reminder here too. Cade Cunningham wasn't the number 1 pick last year or the year before. Like, it's been a couple years for him, and because of the way the NBA tends to do things from a draft standpoint, these guys are coming in at like 19 years old, expected to play as the best basketball players on earth. And sure, there are unicorns like Victor Wembanyama who are up for that, like LeBron James back in 2003. But there weren't a lot of 19-year-olds that were ready to go and help be a part of winning programs in between. And even those two, I think that's the only season in LeBron's career that he didn't make the playoffs was his rookie year. Spurs missed it last year with Wemby. So I think it's a reminder too, Dave, that unfortunately, even if the Wizards get all the drafting right, this is probably going to be a couple years till it pays off. But I think a team like the Pistons shows if you can stay on the right track, and especially if you can get that main guy right, Cunningham's having an unbelievable year, like eventually they will grow into their own, and that's when the winning can truly start. And that's truly when your window opens.
Right. And you know, you can see where the potential for that window for the Wizards, and I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid saying that, but I'm loving calling this draft class because, you know, every night it's like Christmas for them. They're playing in the NBA and they're competing, and you know, so as you build a team, you know, you look at the Pistons. They bring in, you know, they've got the Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, but you bring in, you know, the veterans like a Tobias Harris. They acquired Dennis Schroeder. These pieces that help along the way. It's not just the young players. And look, as we talked about, and we've gone over this, as the Wizards are going through this phase, the veterans that they bring in, they may not be long term. Marcus Smart, I don't think is, you know, long for this team. Neither is Chris Middleton. But do they make a difference while they're here? Have we noticed, you know, games that the Wizards didn't seem to be able to close? Suddenly they're able to close with a Middleton and a Smart on the floor. And there's a certain, you know, nuance that veterans bring to the table. And you hit the nail on the head about LeBron James. Wizards fans will know this. His rookie season, he did not make the playoffs. That was the year the Wizards returned to the playoffs. They beat the Bulls in the first round, but then lost to Miami Heat in the second round. But there's lots of optimism based on that. But then the next season, LeBron does make the playoffs, and then that started that run of 3 straight years where the Cleveland Cavaliers were like the Pittsburgh Penguins were to the Washington Capitals, the Cavaliers were to the Wizards.
Right, the battles that did not go Washington's way, but we don't need to talk about those, Dave. Those are ancient history at this point. Somehow LeBron's still playing, but those are still ancient history at this point. Dave Johnson, of course, play-by-play announcer for the Wizards here on the Team 980, with us ahead of the Wizards and Pistons tonight. It is nice, Dave, to look, and we all understand the long-term here, and the Wizards have done their fair share of losing, and they needed to do that this year based off of where their draft protections and all that kind of stuff. But it is nice as you get towards the end of the season here to see, when I go down their schedule, some green W's mixed in with the red L's, the way that they track it on ESPN.com. What has been the difference kind of since that Nets game where they're kind of alternating wins and losses here? Is it just the coalescing and guys like Middleton and Smart making differences on the margins, or is there anyone else that to you has really stepped up and found a different role that has really suited them that's led to some more winning basketball?
Well, I mean, Middleton Smart has certainly made a difference. But, the Wizards, this is spread out over the season. They've got an incredible record where they're 7-1 when they have 30 or more assists. And that doesn't mean they're trying to do that every game. It's just that, the opponent has something to say about it. But and you've got to also make shots. But with this Wizards team, you're seeing a Bob Carrington evolve into more of a threat in different ways. There's a stat I shared the other game, last game, which was last night. I'm so tired I don't remember it was last night. It was the game. But Bob Carrington is one of only 3 players to have 250 or more assists and 100 or more threes before the age of 20. The other 2 players are Kobe Bryant and Luka Doncic. Now, obviously, that's kind of a closed group because we really didn't have 20-year-olds in the NBA on this kind of basis. For the last, it's been in the last 20, 25 years. So it's not a 60-year-old record that we're looking at, but it's significant, and he's averaging the most minutes of rookies. But why bring up that 3-point stat? Suddenly, Bob Carrington's got a 3-point shot. The mid-range we know, is lights out, but now he's got the confidence from there. Keshawn George, since the All-Star break, and I'll talk about this in our pregame, he's averaging over 10 points a game, over 5 rebounds, and over 4 assists. And of course, he had 5 blocked shots against Toronto last night. In fact, only 2 rookies have had 5 blocked shots in a game, 5 or more. Those rookies are Alex Sarr and Keshawn George. So this is, we knew going in when we had conversations in August and September, we weren't going to be talking about a playoff run in March. What we would be talking about, though, or you wanted to be talking about, do you see growth? Bilal Coulibaly, who, by the way, will not play tonight, as Mason, the wonderful PA announcer, says Detroit basketball, just said hello to me as he walked by. But Bilal Coulibaly the other night, it made the difference in that game with his 18 points, 10 rebounds, 4 steals. And he's every night, his challenge is some of the best players in the NBA, and he does not look deer in headlights. This is now just his role, and he accepts it and is savoring it. This is the feel-good factor for me is that all these young players, we have 3 players in the Rising Stars. Keshawn George could have been a 4th had his rise started a little bit earlier. So, that doesn't mean next year will be the playoff year, but it means you're heading in the right direction. It means you're not saying, oh, wow, we had some high draft picks and they're not working out. That's not the case.
No, definitely not. And then, obviously, I think all eyes are on March for those of us watching the college basketball tournament through a pro lens to see what Cooper Flagg from Duke and some of the other top prospects are going to be able to do. And then draft lotteries around the corner to see where the Wizards will be selecting to try to round out over the next 2 years their collection of draft picks. Going to be a lot of fun. Should be a fun one tonight, too. Pistons are a fun young team if folks want to check it out. And, of course, if you're driving around, listen to Dave call it on the radio. It's a party, I heard. You can check out Dave starting at 6:45 with the pregame 7 o'clock tip. Dave, appreciate you, and we'll talk to you later in the week.
I appreciate the connection, as always. Thanks.
That's Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we will take a look at the best remaining free agents across the NFL. Could any of them be fits in D.C.? But first, the latest on the world, or from the world of women's sports, presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you wanna at Wawa with customizable, crispy, or roasted chicken sandwiches. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Just feels so quiet and quaint today, Anthony, compared to the absolute shenanigans we had yesterday.
I mean, when you have breaking news during your show, it's just you throw out the rundown and then you're just scrambling. To be honest,
yeah.
It was a good scramble though.
Good scramble,
Yeah.
Fun scramble. We'd be scrambling. I heard scrambles are really valuable in the NFL now.
Yes, they are.
So who's left? Who else could be on some breaking news coming to a ticker near you, coming to an Adam Schefter notification? How have you been getting your news, Anthony, during this?
So I still have Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissero.
You got tweet
Ian
notifications.
Yeah, I got the notification. The thing is, I tried to go on Blue Sky to pull them up or to get the notification like I did on Twitter, and for some reason it
Blue Sky still I like Blue Sky better as a platform because I just think that the quality of the platform in general is better, but it's still a newer platform, so some of those features don't exist, which kind of sucks. And there's things that they have a fairly small team. Yet they kept their website up yesterday when Twitter went down. I don't have Twitter on my phone, so I don't get those. But ESPN's app, and I'm sure I could have done that. One, NFL Network is pretty good about the NFL app sends stuff. But you can also subscribe to newsmakers now. And so basically, I think Schefter sends something in a text to editors, and then they distribute it to his Twitter, his Instagram, and then this thing on the ESPN app that you can get notifications specifically, when Adam Schefter breaks news, you get something. So that's how I've been getting it, and it's actually been pretty good.
Maybe I need to look into that.
You got Twitter on your phone still. Just roll with that.
I mean, I still got the ESPN thing too, though. They said you can do it through the ESPN app.
What I hate is that you got the ESPN app, and then Apple News will send you the same thing 3 minutes later.
Yeah,
I got to figure out how to turn that off. Anyway, best available free agents still. Do these players interest you? Let's play a game, Anthony. Let's play a game of yes, no, or maybe. I know, very, very intense game. Very creative. No one's ever thought of this before.
Ever.
Okay. Amari Cooper is, and I'm going to go based off of Greg Rosenthal's top 101 free agents list. Top remaining is Amari Cooper, who is Rosenthal's 11th on NFL.com. Cooper's 1 year on, 1 year off pattern continued in two places last season. He was playing through injuries late in his Bills stint, but he just wasn't very good last year. He's 31 years old. Are you interested in Amari Cooper?
No.
I'm really not that interested either, but also if they signed him to something really small, I would not be mad at it. So I guess that's a maybe?
Yeah, but then you probably wouldn't bring back a Noah Brown. I don't know. I think the injury concerns.
I don't know that what he does is what they need. So I'd probably say no.
Well, to get open, his route
his route running's crazy. But you're kind of relying on Debo. And I guess if you wanted someone else who can beat man coverage,
last year when we had, we had Olamide Zaccheaus, we had Noah Brown, we needed those guys to run 5-yard curls and hitches. He's the perfect guy for that because he's going to get that corner off of him. Or you need to run a slant, something along those lines.
Yeah, the underneath stuff, but a lot of that stuff is going to go to Debo.
Yeah, but not down the field, Yeah,
so he doesn't have the vertical pop anymore. Probably a no, but maybe. All right, this guy might be the most intriguing guy on the list considering their needs, but also I think there's a huge mismatch in styles. Asante Samuel Jr. He's 25 years old. But listen to the write-up and tell me if this sounds like a Commander's corner. Not for his poor tackling and inability to play press coverage, Samuel is a playmaker who steadily improved in his Chargers tenure. He'd be a big asset in the right system.
Nope, because he doesn't tackle.
If he doesn't tackle and he can't play press, he can't play for a DQ Jowett defense.
Yeah.
So, theoretically, a playmaker type of corner, I'm interested. Not in reality.
Yeah.
All right. Cam Robinson, offensive tackle, is next. I think they're good there with the Tunsil trade. Stephon Diggs. I'm good on Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
Attitudinally and play-wise, I'm good on Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Here's a guy I was interested in before 2 days ago. Tevin Jenkins, guard for the Chicago Bears. He's number 28 on this list. Kind of turned his career around a little bit. Very slow start, but I don't think they need another 27-year-old guard. they have Coleman to kick inside now. Unless they're going to put Coleman at tackle, have Wiley be the swing guy, and then they need a guard, in which case I'm interested in Tevin Jenkins. Javon Hargrave, 32 years old, obviously was with a bunch of dudes out in San Francisco, played next to Kinlaw, played under AP, played with Darryl Tapp. I think probably good there. Like at this point with Kinlaw coming in, I think now you go young to fill out that position.
Yeah.
If they could get him super cheap, I'm interested.
Yeah, I think he's.
But like I'm talking vet minimum type deal.
Yeah, I don't. So Tom Pelissero actually reported on him earlier today. It said the Vikings aren't done. They are also closing on a deal with two-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle Javon Hargrave and plan to sign him after his release from the 49ers, which is official on Wednesday. So he might not even be there.
Okay.
Sadly.
I don't know how sad that is. Levi on Wuzurike, the defensive tackle from the Giants. He's had a ton of injuries. He was a favorite of Dan Campbell's. If he's a favorite of Dan Campbell's, he could probably be a favorite of Dan Quinn's.
Yeah.
Tells me you're super physical. Maybe you get him down in the rotation. Maybe he's your fourth guy.
Good motor, probably.
I just don't know how expensive he's going to be. And could you get him on a 1 year, $5 million, 1 year, $4 million type of thing?
Yeah, we need some cheap guys, man.
Yeah, they definitely. Evan Ingram, good on that. Not that he's not a good player, just good. Calais Campbell, like he's a guy that, I mean, he's 39 years old, but he's still like plays football at a decently high level.
What is the dance he does?
Oh,
He does like some like type of like turkey dance or chicken. You never seen him do it?
I don't know. I'm just happy there's a player in the league that's on this list that's older than me, and he's not even close to being same age as me. Josh Myers, center, is 35 on the list. Good there. Kevin Zeitler, guard. Good there. Here's a guy that I would love. Now here's a guy that I would love to see pop up on the Commanders' radar. Azeez Ojulari.
Oh my gosh, Craig. Great minds think alike, because that was the guy I was just waiting for. I'm like, where's Azeez at? Why is he so far down the line?
He's 25 years old. He's got real pass rush juice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, could he like? I don't know that he's your one, but also
situational guy.
On this team right now, who is starting opposite of Dorrance Armstrong? Javonte Jean-Baptiste?
It's a great question, Craig.
Azeez Ojulari is a starter on Washington tomorrow. I'm not mad about that.
I wouldn't be mad either.
Now, would I want to still draft a guy? And that's the thing. Like, could you still draft a guy? Absolutely. But if you tell me you can have Dante Fowler for another year, who sack production-wise was great last year, or take a flyer on Azeez Ojulari, they're going to cost different things. But I'd probably take the flyer on Azeez Ojulari.
But that's also why there's waves of free agency. Is this guy a free agency one caliber guy in your eyes?
I think so. He's 25 years old.
Okay. I think it's fair.
He's the 44th guy on this list. If you want to go older on the edge, Tank Lawrence, 33 years old. I don't hate it. Mekhi Becton, 51 on Rosenthal's list. I'm probably good there. Jameis is 53. Russ is 56. I actually keep forgetting that Jameis is a free agent. Joey Bosa. I am totally out on Joey Bosa. The injuries scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I don't know how he's fitting in a locker room.
And I think he's going to ask for it. Locker room is one, but also I think he's going to ask for a lot of money.
I think he might. I don't want to pay that.
Yeah.
Fowler.
Oh, was he one of the free agents you thought we should sign back? The
thing is, I think he wants the bigger role that he had last year. I don't want him in that role. So if there's a disconnect there, I'm good. But he did have 11.5 sacks last year, I think it was.
Yeah, he did.
Which ain't nothing. But there's also probably a reason he hasn't stuck anywhere.
I'm a maybe.
I'm a maybe.
Maybe.
Charles Omenihu. Probably good.
That's the kid from
Kansas City. He had a domestic violence thing a couple years ago. He also tore his ACL a couple years ago. I don't know like what his work ethic and everything is like. I would need to know a lot more on and off the field about Charles Omenihu before giving it anything close to a yes. Maybe a maybe, but probably a no.
Yeah, I really wanted the kid Wharton from Kansas City, but he got a bigger deal.
J.K. Dobbins, 26-year-old running back. I think they're good on running back. Rico Dowdle, same thing. Here's a guy that I am very interested in. Zadarius Smith. Played last year, finishing out with the Lions. Like, he plays physically, he plays violent. Like, get him in the rotation, get him in the room. Go draft the guy, but get Zadarius Smith in the room if you can get him on a 1 year, $10 million deal.
1 for 10. I
If
think
Khalil
he'd do it.
Mack is worth 18, is Zadarius Smith worth 10?
Do you have faith that he'd play the entire season?
If he's in a rotation and he's playing 600 snaps, let me see if I can find his snap count real quick. Zadarius Smith, Pro Football.
Because he was with the Vikings at first, and then he went to the Lions last year.
I do believe that is how that went down.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Why would the Vikings move on from him?
Well, his contract was coming up, so they were like, we can get a draft pick return.
Yeah.
So last year he played 584. No, sorry. The last 3 years he's played 771, 584, and 618 snaps.
Okay.
If I tell you I just need you to get 600 snaps,
that's cool.
3-time Pro Bowler. Like, he's not the guy he was in Baltimore. He's not the guy he was in Green Bay when he was Pro Bowler. But 2022 ain't that long ago when he was a Pro Bowler. So, like, again, I don't need him to be Pro Bowler Zadarius Smith. I need you to be rotational player Zadarius Smith. And I would like to pay for that at a much discounted rate compared to Pro Bowler Zadarius Smith. But a pro's pro, plays hard, sets a good edge, plays the run well. That's the kind of defensive end they didn't really have last year.
I'm in.
Okay.
Sign me up. Yes,
Great.
He's a yes. So we got one yes so far?
One definite yes.
Oh, okay.
Mike Williams, Justin. Now, stop me if you're a yes on any of these. Mike Williams, receiver. Justin Simmons, safety.
Oh.
Moderately interested, less interested after signing Will Harris, but I don't think it'd be a no.
Yeah.
Stephon Gilmore.
No.
Kaiser White, linebacker. No. Rasul Douglas.
Nickelback wouldn't be the word. I would take him over Noah, but I think they really love. Well,
I don't know that I would take him. Rasul Douglas is 31 years old, and he doesn't really have a lot of speed.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore. I think you can do worse at receiver, plus he's 25. It's a maybe. Sheriff, good. Keenan Allen.
No.
I'm good. Julian Blackmon.
No.
Safety, good on that. Tyrell Dotson, linebacker, no. Tyron Smith, no. Mike Hilton, safety from Cincinnati. You can also play down in the slot.
No.
Like, I think I'm good because I want Mikey back inside. DeAndre Hopkins, no. Jedrick Wills, former top 10 pick. He's interesting to me. Yeah. I would kick the tires on him.
Yeah.
Because, like, he played in college on the right side. He was a failed left tackle. What happens if you can get him to be your swing guy, let him back up Wiley for a year, and if he all of a sudden rediscovers that he's good at football as a right tackle, he could be your guy next year.
Yep.
And, like, I would sign him to something where I've got a little bit of control.
Was he – because he was at left tackle when he was in Cleveland?
And he stunk.
Yeah, so maybe moving him to the right side might be the adjustment
maybe.
that needs to
Maybe
happen.
He's not a guy – like, you know, it's kind of like hitting in baseball. Some people can switch hit. Some people can't. Different movement mechanics. DJ Jones, defensive tackle, probably good there. Kenneth Gainwell and Nick Chubb are the guys who round out the available on Greg Rosenthal's top 101 list. All right, there's our very creative game. Yes, no, maybe. Commanders still looking for a couple of positions. Some interesting names still available. There's more than we just said, too. There's especially in the wide receiver market. Like guys like Marcus Valdez-Scantling available still. That could be really interesting for Washington. Kind of a one-trick pony, but might do the one trick they need him to do. When we get back, we will wrap up the show before we give way to Dave and Glenn for some Wizards basketball here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show, wrapping up final 5 minutes here on the Team 980. Then we give away 2 Wizards basketball. Tomorrow on the show, it's a short show tomorrow, right, Anthony? I think we're only going until 6?
6:15.
6:15. And then Georgetown DePaul in the Big East tournament. A tournament I used to care about a lot more when my team was in the Big East. My alma mater. Our alma mater, Anthony. Oh, the days. Although you were an ACC kid.
I technically. Well, I think I got 2.
You were 2-2?
Yeah, I think it was 2-2.
Mm.
Yep, 2-2.
Yeah. Now the ACC has Cal in it. Stanford. Old Atlantic Coast Conference. What a silly state of affairs we're in. Anyway, college hoops all week long here on the Team 980. You got Georgetown DePaul tomorrow. If Georgetown wins, obviously we'll have their game on Thursday as well. And then the Terps playing on Friday at 6. So get your Hoffman Show while you can. Logan and I also recording a Fresh Take Command tomorrow. We might actually go live depending on what kind of news breaks in the morning, if there's anything else that happens. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. If we go live, it'll be on all 3 channels. It'll be on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, and my YouTube channel at Craig Hoffman. So subscribe there. And, of course, if you're an audio first listener to Take Command, totally get that as well. That's typically how I listen to podcasts. There's not a single podcast I watch online, but I do my podcast online, and then I engage with my podcast that I do mostly on YouTube, I should say. So that makes no sense. Anyway, the point is subscribe. That way you don't miss an episode, no matter how it is you prefer to take in Professor Paulson's knowledge and whatever I do to help make that as digestible as possible. Anything else that we got on a Wednesday, Anthony?
No, I think that's everything.
All right. Then it's time for Real Things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, let's see if we can get this one in. I was sad we didn't get to play it yesterday. Matt Painter was asked something about strategy, and the Purdue head coach gave a masterclass of an answer.
When they went to like their chin action where they cut through, which they don't do a lot of, when they did that, we just tried to hold that guy there. So when he came off the ball screen, we just dropped, and then we switched it up top. So when they went into their flat ball screen up top, we wanted to weak it and send it to their weak hand. And then when they were going to go Spain, are you speaking my language? Okay. And when they wanted to go Spain, right there, we just brought our guy up and switched it up top, and then we dropped our 5. But we wanted to make sure the 5 greeted the 5 diving, so he wasn't getting a deep post up at time. That's why you saw Bilodeau get that kind of a 10-foot right there. He can make that, and we wanted to have an early hand with him right there. But we just didn't want Andrews and Sebastian Mack attacking Trey. We wanted to keep that out of there. They exited. They sent it the other side in the second half a couple times, so we had to stay right there, then drop out of it. You saw them snake it a couple times and get us. And that if they would have stayed the same side, we'd have been fine in our drop. But when they snaked it, we dropped back like we were going to go Spain. And now that created the space to be able to to be able to snake. So then we switched at the end of the game and told him to touch his shoulder. And when he exited out of it, we would still stay with it like we did, because you just can't ignore that when he goes to the other side. So when we weak it, we keep it to that side, okay? So now we come up into it that way. Well, he exits the other way. Now we told that other guy to hold in cover 2 to play that if he went and took it. So he took it and they went out of it. Our guy in cover 2, you got to come high in cover 2 and force him to throw it to the corner, because that's why you see all those wing to corner 1-mores. You got to eliminate it, so they got to 1-more and invert it, but throw it to the corner. But when you throw it to the corner, that's hopefully more time. Then you X out of that in your rotation, then everybody has to come over to it. So then once we got to that and we knew the exit, so we called off what we were doing, and then we played it flat, but we touched his shoulder to take the space so they wouldn't get that. Make sense?
You got all that, Ant?
Sort of, kind of. No, not really.
I will say the Instagram post that you found this on did a great job of diagramming it, and I was like, okay. I like when coaches and or players occasionally remind most of us that we don't know what we're talking about.
Man.
there's ways to talk about what they did without using all of the terminology, but just a reminder, these guys are pretty smart. Speaking of guys that are pretty smart, Dave Johnson leads our Wizards coverage starting now.